It started last April, just as spring was kicking in. I had just moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Portland. It wasn't anything fancy. Thin walls, no elevator, and an always flickering hallway light outside my unit. But the rent was fair, and it was close to my new job. I was 29, working remotely as a copy editor for a tech firm, and trying to piece my life back together after a messy breakup. The place was quiet, neighbors mostly kept to themselves, and I liked the anonymity. I don't usually answer unknown numbers, but because of my job, I had to. Freelancers, vendors, conference coordinators, all kinds of random calls came through every day. So when I got a call from a local number one Thursday evening around 9:30 p.m., I didn't hesitate to pick it up. No one spoke, just silence, then a soft, short click as the line went dead. I didn't think much of it. It was late, maybe a wrong number. But then the voicemail came in. I clicked on it out of habit, expecting someone to apologize for a missed call. Instead, I heard my own voice, not talking to the caller, talking to someone else. A conversation I had earlier that afternoon, on Zoom. I was walking a client through edits on a tech manual. It was word for word. Same tone, same little sigh I gave halfway through. I thought maybe Zoom had glitched and forwarded something weird to my phone. But that didn't make sense. This wasn't a Zoom voicemail. It was a mobile voicemail. And more than that, it wasn't the whole conversation. It was just me speaking. One side, like someone had recorded only my audio. I saved the message but deleted the number from my call history. I chalked it up to some bizarre software issue. Something technical I didn't understand. But the whole thing left me feeling exposed, like I'd been overheard. The next day passed normally. I had deadlines to meet and edits to return. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even think about it again, until it happened again. Friday night, 10:04 p.m. Another call, another voicemail, another recording of me. This time talking to my landlord about renewing my lease. Again, just my voice, not his. That's when the panic set in. I went through my phone's call log, looking for anything suspicious. Nothing, just the usual numbers. I checked if my phone had been hacked. It hadn't. No strange apps. No weird permissions granted. I scanned it for malware. Clean. I even checked my MacBook, wondering if somehow my Zoom calls had been intercepted. But there was nothing. Saturday, I turned off my phone for the night. No calls came through, obviously. But Sunday morning, when I turned it back on, there were 2 missed calls from unknown numbers, and a voicemail. I listened with my heart racing. It was a voice memo from myself, talking out loud while reviewing a document. I had done it while pacing my apartment that morning, not realizing I was speaking my thoughts. No one had been in the room, no phone call, no meeting. And yet, someone had recorded it. That was when I stopped sleeping properly. I bought blackout curtains, started locking the door with a deadbolt, and even slid a chair under the doorknob at night. I turned my phone off whenever I wasn't working. I covered the laptop camera, taped over the mic input, and stopped using Bluetooth altogether. Still, the voicemails kept coming. Once a night. Always a conversation I'd had earlier in the day. Always just my side, never the other person's. I called my phone provider and explained the issue. The tech support guy was polite, but useless. He ran a quick diagnostics test, told me there was no breach, no duplicate SIM, no signs of cloning. He recommended I change my number. I did. It was a pain, re-verifying every login, updating clients and contacts. But for a few days, the calls stopped. I thought it was over. Then, the new number rang. This time, the caller ID just said, "Private." I ignored it. A minute later, the voicemail came in. It was my voice again, talking to my sister on speakerphone earlier that day. This time, though, it ended with something new. A second voice. Faint, at the very end of the recording. Low, distorted. Just one sentence. "You sound better when you're scared." I dropped the phone. I don't remember the rest of that evening clearly. I remember crying, sitting on the kitchen floor, holding my breath every time the fridge made a noise or the pipes creaked. I didn't sleep. I barely moved. The next morning I called the police. They sent a patrol car, took a report. I showed them the voicemails. They looked concerned but said there wasn't much they could do unless it escalated into a direct threat. They suggested installing security cameras and contacting my phone carrier again. That night, I didn't turn my phone on. But I checked my email. There was a new message in my inbox, sent from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: Voices sound best in echo. No text, just an audio file attachment. I didn't open it. I forwarded it to my cousin Jeremy. He's in cybersecurity. He called me 10 minutes later and asked where I got the file. I explained everything, shakily. He told me the audio was high quality, not pulled from a phone or mic. He said the voice samples were too clean, too focused, like they'd been edited and isolated. And whoever made it had layered in background frequencies that he described as deliberate distortion techniques. I asked him what that meant. He said, "It wasn't an accidental recording. Someone is doing this on purpose, and they know what they're doing." I asked if he could trace it. He tried. No IP, no metadata. The email server was based overseas, burner address. He said I needed to get offline, use a second phone, stop speaking near electronics, at least for a while. So I did. For a full week, I went off-grid. I stayed at my friend Lacey's place across town, left my laptop and phone at home, and didn't touch any of my devices. I thought maybe this would break the pattern. I didn't say anything important out loud. I wrote everything on paper. I felt like I was going insane. But for 7 days, nothing happened. No calls, no voicemails, no emails. On the 8th day, I returned to my apartment. The first thing I noticed was the light in my kitchen. It was on. I never leave it on. I walked inside slowly, heart pounding, checking every room. Nothing seemed out of place, but something felt wrong. My phone was on the kitchen table, even though I had left it turned off in my nightstand drawer. I picked it up. There was one voicemail, just breathing at first. Then, my voice, speaking a sentence I had never said before. "I can't hide anymore." Then silence. I dropped the phone again and ran out. I haven't slept in that apartment since. I moved, got a new place, switched devices, changed numbers again. No more voicemails, no more emails. It's been quiet for 3 months now. But yesterday, I got a package at my new address. No return label, no name, just a padded envelope. Inside was a USB drive. I haven't plugged it in, but it's sitting on my desk right now. And every time I walk past it, I swear I can hear static. Before we dive into the next story, if you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Your support truly encourages us and helps this channel continue to grow. And don't forget to share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. I'm a 37-year-old guy living in a quiet suburb outside Lexington, Kentucky. This happened 3 years ago, in early spring, during a time when I wasn't doing so great mentally. My wife had passed away from a sudden aneurysm just 8 months prior. It was the kind of thing that doesn't make any sense when it happens. 1 minute you're planning dinner, the next you're picking out a casket. I was trying to survive the days one at a time. Just me and my dog, Chester. in a house that suddenly felt way too big. I was on extended leave from my job as a field technician, so most of my time was spent inside. I wasn't socializing. I wasn't going anywhere. I just stayed home, watched TV, and made sure Chester was fed. That was my routine. It was a Saturday night. Around 8:30, I put a frozen pizza in the oven and started watching some old crime show reruns in the living room. My dog was sleeping by the fireplace, and I remember thinking, for the first time in weeks, that things actually felt calm. About halfway through the second episode, I heard a metallic clank, like something had hit the front gate. I muted the TV, but I didn't hear it again, so I brushed it off. Probably a squirrel or a branch falling. I lived on a cul-de-sac, and my property had one of those short decorative fences with a little iron gate that was more for looks than security. 15 minutes later, I heard it again. Same clank, same metallic echo. This time, Chester lifted his head and let out a low growl. I walked to the front window, peeked through the blinds, and saw someone standing just outside the gate. It was a kid. He looked maybe 8 or 9. Couldn't see his face clearly because he was facing the ground, but he had dark, messy hair and was holding what looked like a stick. Maybe a piece of rebar or a metal pole. Hard to tell from that distance. He wasn't moving, just standing there. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. "Hey, bud, you okay?" I called out. No answer. "You lost or something? Where's your family?" Still nothing. He didn't even flinch. That's when Chester started barking like crazy behind me, and I turned for half a second to shut the door behind me so he wouldn't run out. When I looked back, the kid was gone. I walked down the steps, scanned the front yard, and even checked behind the hedges near the gate. But he was nowhere. The road was empty. No cars. No footsteps. It was like he'd vanished. I chalked it up to my own nerves and went back inside, making a mental note to check the motion lights and maybe review the old camera system I hadn't used in years. But here's the thing. That wasn't the end of it. At around 1 a.m., Chester started whining at the back door. Not barking. Whining, the kind of sound he made when he was scared. I got up, turned on the kitchen light, and looked through the glass panel on the back door. There was nothing. I opened the door to let him sniff around the patio. He walked out, took a few cautious steps, and then bolted back inside, tail down, ears pinned back. That dog never acted like that. He wasn't a coward. I locked the door and sat back down on the couch, but the sense of peace I'd felt earlier was long gone. The next morning, I checked the old security system. It had 4 outdoor cameras, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. But I hadn't checked them in a while. The footage was saved locally on an old hard drive in the closet. I plugged it into my laptop. At 8:47 p.m. the night before, one of the front cameras picked up motion. I fast-forwarded and paused. There he was. The kid was standing at the gate, holding the same pole or stick. But what made me freeze wasn't the image. It was the timestamp. He had been standing there for almost 40 minutes before I ever noticed him. Just standing, unmoving. The clip didn't show him walking away. One frame, he was there. The next, gone. I spent the rest of Sunday checking every lock in the house, every blind, every curtain. I even moved a chair under the doorknob of my bedroom just in case. That night, I didn't sleep. The following evening, it rained. It was cold, windy, and miserable. I figured whatever was going on was over. No kid would be wandering around in that weather. I was wrong. At 11:12 p.m., I heard the clank again. Louder. This time, followed by the squeal of the gate swinging open. Chester was at the foot of my bed, growling toward the hallway. I grabbed the old baseball bat I kept next to the dresser and walked slowly toward the front of the house. I peeked through the side window beside the door, and my blood turned cold. The kid was standing at the edge of my porch now, closer than ever, wet from the rain, still holding the same metal pole. I didn't open the door. Instead, I flicked on the porch light. That's when I realized he wasn't alone. 2 adults were crouched just out of the light's reach, tucked behind the porch railings, both in dark jackets, hoods up, low to the ground, like they were hiding, waiting. One of them looked up as the light came on. We locked eyes. I didn't think. I just ran to the bedroom, locked the door, and called 911. I told the dispatcher everything as calmly as I could, but my voice was shaking. While I was still on the line, I heard the sound of the front doorknob jiggling, followed by a soft thud, like someone leaning into it. Then, silence. By the time the cops got there, no one was outside. Not the kid, not the 2 people behind him. They checked the perimeter, took a report, and said they'd send a car around every couple of hours just in case. They also asked if I had any enemies, or if I'd been in any recent disputes. I hadn't. They asked if I was sure about what I saw. I was. Over the next 2 nights, I didn't hear or see anything. I started to question myself. Maybe it had been a weird, failed robbery attempt. Maybe they were squatters or drifters trying random houses. But then, on the 3rd night, something else happened. Around 2 a.m., Chester started barking violently from the living room. I ran out, turned on every light, and froze. The front door was wide open. I always locked it. Always. I grabbed my bat and slowly stepped outside. The motion light came on, but the yard was empty, until I looked down. On the welcome mat was a piece of paper. Written in a child's messy handwriting were 4 words. "We saw you looking." I didn't sleep at all after that. The next morning, I called a private security company. I had a full system installed. High-resolution cameras, window sensors, motion detectors, the works. I also bought a new deadbolt and installed it myself. I wasn't taking any chances. Since then, nothing has happened. No more knocks, no more clanks, no more visits. But here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. Last month, I was cleaning out the old basement storage to make space for some tools. At the very back, behind an old shelving unit, I found something taped to the inside of the concrete wall. It was a Polaroid photo. Faded, dirty, water damaged, but clearly visible. It was a picture of my house, taken from the sidewalk at night. And in the bottom corner, just barely in frame, was Chester, staring right at the camera. I never found out who they were, or what they really wanted. But I moved out of that house 2 weeks later, and I never looked back. My name's Ryan, and I grew up in a relatively quiet suburb just outside Naperville, Illinois. I'm 23 now, but this happened last spring during my final year of college. I had just come home for spring break, hoping for a week of sleep and silence. No frat parties, no group projects, just me, my laptop, and a week's worth of skipping real pants. My parents were away for most of the week on a couple's retreat in Michigan, which meant I had the house to myself. I'd promised to take care of the dog, the mail, and their aggressively needy garden. Not a problem. The first couple of days were uneventful, genuinely peaceful. I hit the gym early every morning and made breakfast like I was trying to convince myself I had my life together. On Wednesday, things changed. It started with a van. That morning, around 6:15 a.m., I left the gym parking lot and took the usual back route through the older part of the neighborhood. As I turned onto Stonewell Drive, I noticed a white van parked along the side of the road. It had no logos, just plain white with a rusted bumper and tinted front windows. What caught my eye was the orange safety cone placed behind it. It looked like a utility van, but not one I recognized from the city services. There was no one outside the van, and I couldn't see into the cab. I slowed a little, not because I thought much of it, but just because something about it felt misplaced. It was early, and nobody else was around. I went home, fed the dog, showered, and forgot about it. Until later that afternoon, when I walked outside to take the trash out and saw the same van. This time, it was parked on my street, 2 houses down, facing the opposite direction. I froze for a second on the driveway, trash bag in hand, just staring at it. I couldn't explain why, but my stomach tightened. It wasn't illegal to park on the street, and maybe it was just some contractor doing work on one of the houses. But there was no ladder rack, no decals, no tools, just that stupid orange cone behind it again. I tossed the trash and walked back inside. Over the next 48 hours, that van showed up every day, sometimes on the next block, sometimes on mine. It never parked directly in front of my house, but it was always close enough to notice. I started keeping the curtains closed in the front rooms and glancing through the peephole before I opened the door. On Friday, it got worse. That evening, I was upstairs gaming when my headset mic cut out. I took it off to adjust the wire and heard the dog whining downstairs. Then I heard a click, the kind of soft metallic sound a screen door makes when it closes. I paused the game and walked to the top of the stairs, listening. Silence. The porch light was on, so I could see part of the front yard through the frosted glass of the side window. There was a shadow stretching across the porch, a long one. I grabbed the small metal bat my dad kept behind the coat rack and crept closer. The dog was hiding behind the couch, tail between his legs. I pulled the curtain aside, just enough to peek through. There, standing by the edge of the lawn, was a man. Mid-40s maybe. Tall, wearing a dark blue zip-up jacket and a gray beanie pulled low. His back was to me. He was standing perfectly still, looking up at the house. My house. Like he was reading something above the door. I didn't recognize him. I reached for my phone and took a photo through the glass. I didn't want to scare him off, not yet. I wanted proof. I sent the photo to my dad and asked if he'd hired anyone to check the gutters or something. He replied almost immediately. No. Stay inside. By the time I looked again, the man was gone. Not walking down the street. Not getting into a car. Just gone. I stayed up most of the night. Around 3 a.m. I peeked out again and saw the van. This time, it was parked across the street. No orange cone this time. No running lights. Just sitting in the dark. And then I saw it, the tiniest glow from the inside. Someone was in it. Watching the house, I called the non-emergency police line and gave them everything. They said they'd send someone to check it out. About 20 minutes later, the van pulled away before the patrol car even arrived. The officer was polite, but clearly skeptical. Could be a contractor, could be a weirdo, could be nothing, he said. Keep your doors locked and give us a call if he comes back. Great. Saturday night was worse. I stayed off my computer and mostly read upstairs, trying to keep myself calm. Around midnight, the dog started growling softly at the bedroom window. Not barking, growling. My room was on the second floor, facing the backyard. I flicked off the lights and looked out through the slats of the blinds. There, right by the back fence, was a figure. It was hard to see clearly, but it was someone small. Maybe a child. They were holding something shiny, metallic. I couldn't tell what. I blinked, and they were gone. It wasn't until morning that I found what they left behind. On the back porch, propped up against the glass door, was a wrench, just sitting there, as if someone had laid it down carefully. My stomach turned when I picked it up. It was warm, like it hadn't been sitting outside for long. That afternoon, I walked the neighborhood, knocked on a couple of doors, asked a few folks if they'd noticed the white van. Most said no. One older guy down the street said he thought he saw it drive past, A few times, but hadn't paid attention. Sunday morning, the final straw. At 5:15 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of music. Tinny, warped, distant. It sounded like an old music box. I sat up in bed, heart racing. The dog was barking now, loud, frantic. I ran downstairs barefoot and checked every window. Nothing. And then, just as I reached the front door, something slid through the mail slot and landed on the floor with a soft flap. It was a photo, a printed Polaroid. It showed me, sleeping in my bed. Lights off, taken from just outside the window. I screamed. I backed away, locked the deadbolt, and ran to grab my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I grabbed my things and went out through the garage, dog in tow. I drove straight to the nearest police station. That photo was enough to get them to take things seriously. They pulled surveillance footage from traffic cameras and found images of the van entering the neighborhood multiple times during the week, but never leaving. Which meant whoever it was lived nearby, or knew a way in and out that bypassed the main roads. 2 days later, my parents came back and replaced the locks. We added cameras and motion lights, but by then the van was gone, never seen again. The police never found the man. The photo had no fingerprints. The wrench was clean. And when I described the figure in the backyard, they just exchanged glances and said, "We've had a few calls like that lately." Calls like what? That's when I learned. 2 blocks away, a family reported their 5-year-old son had gone missing the same week. They said he disappeared from the backyard during daylight. No sign of a struggle. No witnesses. The last time the boy had been seen, he was playing with a toy wrench near the fence. I still wonder if what I saw in the yard that night was really a child, or something pretending to be one. I moved out of my parents' house and now live in an apartment building downtown with proper security and too much lighting. But sometimes, when I walk home late, I pass a row of white service vans parked in front of a nearby construction site. And even though I know it's irrational, I still hold my breath as I walk by, just in case one of them turns their headlights on.